Om Sai Ram. Let us understand chapter number 6, the narration of the story of Ram Janam celebrations. But before that, let us do the Namasmaran, followed by chapter number 6, the narration of the story of Janam celebration, and we will conclude chapter number 6 with the Aarti. श्री सच्चिदानंद सद्गुरु साईनाथ महाराज की जय। ओम श्री साई नाथाय नमः। 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 ओम साई राम। Chapter number 6, the narration of the story of Ram Janam celebrations. I bow down to Shri Ganesh. I bow down to Shri Saraswati. I bow down to the Guru. I bow down to the family deity. I bow down to Shri Sita Ramachandra. I bow down to Shri Satguru Sainath. Whether in the worldly or spiritual life, whenever the Satguru is the captain of the ship, he will steer the ship along with the passengers to the opposite bank. The very word Satguru immediately brings to mind Sai. He stands in front of me and blesses with his hand on his head, on the head. As soon as the boon giving hand, which has the Udi from the Dhuni, touches my head, my heart goes into a rapture with the inner happiness and my eyes brim with love. How marvelous is the touch of the hand of the Guru, which has the power to destroy the subtle body, which is burnt to ashes. At the touch of the hand, the subtle body, which cannot be burnt even by the inferno of the dissolution of the world. It can even steady the mind of those who are annoyed even by an accidental mention of God or by his tales and speak intemperately. As soon as he puts his lotus like hand on the head, the accumulated sins from many previous births are washed off at and the loving devotees of Sai are purified. Having seen the comely having seen the features, you are choked with extreme bliss of tears of happiness and roll down, and the heart is overwhelmed with Ashta Sattvic Bhava. He awakens the thought of oneness. The inner happiness reveals itself. It dissipates the twofold nature because of the oneness which God and evenly spreads unity. When one starts reading the sacred books and the Puranas, the Satguru comes with to one's mind at every step. Sai is Rama and Krishna and makes us listen to his own life story. When listening to the Bhagavad, which is the Puran, Krishna himself becomes the embodiment of Sai, singing praises of Uddhava for the good of his devotees. Even in casual conversation, incidents and stories of Sai's life unexpectedly are recalled to illustrate a point. Intent on writing. When you take up a paper and pen in the hand, words elude you. But when he makes us write at his command, it becomes difficult to cope with the flow of words. The moment ego raises its head, he immediately suppresses it. And by creating awareness of higher consciousness, he brings discipline and a sense of fulfillment. When you surrender to the powerful side, body, soul, virtue, wealth, love, and deliverance are attained without striving and unasked. The fourfold path of karma, action, jnana, knowledge, yoga, yogic powers, and bhakti, devotion, through each is distinct from the other, all lead to the same goal. The path of bhakti is the thorny path, like the path through the prickly babul forest. It is full of pits and potholes. One or two steps in the right direction takes you really close to God. You should avoid the thorns and step forward. You will reach the destination without fear. This is the only remedy, says Guru Mai very clearly. When the orchard of mind is watered by devotion, detachment will grow, knowledge will blossom, union with the Supreme Spirit comes to fruition, and joy will burst forth, avoiding the cycle of birth and death as a certainty. The primeval supreme soul is self existent. It is a threefold concept: Satchidanand, truth, consciousness, and bliss. It appears by transformation in the visual image and actually manifests for the sake of devotees. As Brahman became manifest through its threefold attributes, Maya became active and steering sattva, righteousness, rajas, activity, tamas, inertia exhibits her qualities. When a particular shape is given to clay, it is called a pot rightfully. But when the pot breaks, it loses its name, form, and identity. The whole world is born of Maya, and both are the cause and effect to each other. Thus, Maya itself manifests as it were with different limbs in the form of the world. If you look at the nature of Maya, before the existence of the world, nothing is apparent. She was dormant in the supreme consciousness through residing in it. She was not perceivable. Even if perceivable, it is actually the supreme self. When it is not perceivable, then also it is the supreme self. Thus, Maya is the supreme self. It cannot be distinguishable from the supreme self. In the beginning, Maya created lifeless, immovable, static objects from the inertia quality and completed the first part of her action. Afterwards, when the Supreme Self was conjoined with the Raj Gauna of Maya, it revealed the mind of percipience of essential activities endowed with the aspects of both. Later on, out of the Sattva of Maya was created the intellect, which, when combined with the divine bliss of the Supreme Self, completed the whole process of creation. Thus, Maya, susceptible to great modifications till she is motivated towards activity, does not create the things which are above mentioned, and the three gunas remain unmanifested. Maya cannot be apparent unless she performs actions according to the three gunas. She can exist without appearance and practice non activity, which is nothing but passivity. Maya is the creation of the Supreme Being. The universe is the creation of Maya. All this is means that the world, Maya, and the Supreme Being are all united and one. Those who keenly desire and intent on realizing this unity should refer to the Vedas and the Shrutis. The Vedas, Shastras, Shrutis, Smritis teachers, and scriptures give us the knowledge, the discriminating intellect, and ultimate happiness. In the home of my devotees, food and clothing will never be lacking. This is an assurance given by Shri Sai, and the devotees were aware of this. Those who wholeheartedly worship me and lovingly serve me. I will look after their well being. This I know will be my motto. This is also the affirmation of Bhagavad Gita. Sai says to accept this universal truth. There will never be shortage of food and clothing. Therefore, do not hanker after them. This one should seek honor of the door of God and should beg only from God, ask only His blessings. Worldly prestige should be left aside. Why are you satisfied by the honor given to you by society? And why are you infatuated by that? Rather, seek through intense devotion and move your chosen deity through compassion and to express your joy through copious streams of sattvic bhava. May you find joy in such striving. Let all the faculties be seized with such a devotional urge so that the passion of senses may be transformed and sprout devotional worship. What desire will then remain? May such devotion be your constant preoccupation, leaving no relish for anything else. May the mind be engaged in constant chanting of my name and let everything be forgotten. Then there will be no thought of body, home, and wealth. The heart will be fixed on the infinite happiness. The mind will be balanced and serene, and it will find fulfillment in itself. A contented mind is the surest sign of association with the holy. How can a wandering mind be considered as being surrendered to God? Therefore, with full concentration, all listeners, listen to the explanation with faith. By listening to the Sai Satcharithra, let your mind be inclined towards devotion. Along with the narration, you will feel contented. Your wayward mind will find peace. Agitation will disappear and you will achieve happiness. Now, we will go back to the earlier thread of the story about renovation of the masjid and the kirtan about the birth of Ram. Let us proceed with the narration. There was one devotee by name of Gopal Gund who had great devotion for Baba. He spent his time ceaselessly chanting Baba's name. He had no children. Later, with Sai's blessings, he begot a son. His mind was thus happy. So Gopal Gun thought of holding a yatra and urus yearly in the Shirdi village. Everybody would be joyous. Tatya Kote, Dada Kote, Madhav Rao, and other leading devotees approved of this idea and began to make preparations. But for such annual festivals, there was a certain regulation. The permission of the district officer was required. When the efforts were made to secure the permission, a perverse Kulkarni from the village went against and put obstacles in the way. When the Kulkarni came in the way, look what was the result. The district officer issued an order that the yatra should not be held at Shirdi, but to hold the yatra in Shirdi was also Baba's wish, and he had commanded them to fulfill this along with his blessings. The villagers perceived and tried their utmost. The authorities changed the earlier order and honored the wishes of the people. Since then, according to Baba's wish, the yatra takes place on Ram Navami. Tatya Kotes looks after the arrangements and the large crowd gatherings. On Ram Navami day, devotional singing, worship takes place, and the accompaniment of drums and other wind instruments. People flock there from all four quarters in large numbers. Every year, two new flags are ceremoniously carried in procession and tied to the dome of the masjid and permanently fixed there. Out of the two, one would be Nimonkar's and the other Damuannas. They are taken with pomp in procession and they fly high on top of the dome. Now, listen to the interesting account of how the celebrations of Ram Navami originated from the Urus, which is unusual. The pleasure and glory of Shirdi originating from the Urus. Ram Navami was celebrated for the first time in Shake 1833, and since then it continues uninterruptedly to be held to this day. The famous Krishna Jogeshwar Bhishma was the originator of the idea of celebrating the birth of Ram, which he thought would be greatly beneficial for all. Till then, it was only the Urus for which the people participated. Since that year, the beautiful festival of the birth of Ram took place. Once, as Bhishma was peacefully sitting in the Vada and Kaka was ready to leave for the masjid along with the puja paraphernalia. In his heart, Kaka, was thinking of Sai Darshan and outwardly he was enthusiastic about the Urus. Kaka had come a day earlier to Shirdi for the celebrations. Considering it was an opportune moment, Bhishma asked Kaka, would you give me help for a good cause that has inspired me? Here, every year, Urus is held on the day which also gives birth of Ram. Therefore, this is the natural opportunity to hold the ceremony of the birth of Ram. Kaka liked the idea and asked Bhishma to obtain Baba's consent. It would depend on his wish. Then there would be no delay in the work. But for the celebration, there would have to be a kirtan. This was the problem. For where would one get a Haridas in a small village? This was the question. Bhishma said, who would be the kirtankar? You can accompany me on the harmonium, and Radha Krishna Bai would be prepared to make the Santvada at proper time. Come, then let's go to Baba. Any delay for a good cause poses problems. A good cause accompanied by promptness will be executed efficiently. Come along, let us go and ask permission to perform kirtan. So saying, they both arrived in the masjid in time. No sooner had Kaka begun to worship, Baba on his own asked, what was the discussion going on in the Vada? And Kaka could not think of an answer. Immediately, Baba asked Bhishma the same question in a different way. What has Bua got to say? Asked Baba of him. Then Kaka remembered and disclosed the intention. Baba liked the idea and it was decided to hold the celebrations. Next day, early the morning, seeing that Baba had gone to the Lendi, a cradle was put in the courtyard with ceremonious preparations for the kirtan. The audience assembled. Later on, Baba returned on time. Bhishma got up. Kaka sat down on the harmonium. Then Baba sent for Kaka. Baba is calling you. Hearing this, Kaka got a shock. He could not understand what had happened. Let there not be a fiasco. On hearing Baba's call, Kaka became scared. Why has Baba become so angry? Will the kirtan take place without any difficulty? He walked ahead, casting backward glances. He climbed up the steps with fear. His steps were very timid. Kaka was extremely worried. Baba asked him a question as to why the cradle was tied here, and having learnt in the brief story the reason behind it and the whole scheme, he was very happy. Then, from the niche, he took a beautiful garland and put it around Kaka's neck and gave another for Bhishma. Having heard the question about the cradle, there was anxiety all around. But when the garlands were put around the necks, everyone were at ease. Bhishma was a versatile man, well versed in narrating kathas. The kirtan was very enjoyable and all the listeners were very pleased. Baba too was very pleased. According to his consent, the festival had taken place along with bhajan, kirtan, etc. At the time of birth of Ram, the red gulal powder that was thrown about went into Baba's eyes and Baba became enraged. He looked terrible like Narahari. And at that hour, when Rama was born in the place of Kaushalya, the Gulal was just an excuse. The action implied the fervor at the birth of Ram, who would destroy the ego in the form of Ravan and wickedness in the form of Rakshas. Suddenly, he was annoyed. He became as it were Narasimha. Then started abuses and curses which were showered upon all. Radha Krishnamai was Bai was quite concerned as she thought the cradle would be broken into pieces. How can it be kept intact? There was difficulty she faced. Please untie, quickly untie. She was insistent. Kaka moved forward to untie the cradle. Then Baba got very angry and rushed forward towards Kaka. The untying of the cradle was forgotten and Baba regained his composure. When in the afternoon Baba's permission was sought, his answer surprised everyone. Why should you untie the cradle in such a hurry? Is it still needed? What could this necessity be? Sai's words were never spoken in vain. When given a thought, the realization dawned that the festival was not yet complete. The festival had progressed up to a stage, but till the dawn of next day and until the time of Gopal Kala, the festival could not be said to be complete. In this way, on the second day after Gopal Kala and the Kirtan, Baba gave his consent to untie the cradle. Next year, Bhishma was not available. Balabua Satarkar was to be brought for the Kirtan, but he had to go to Kawate. Therefore, Balabua Bhajani, known as the modern Tukaram, was brought by Kaka Mahajani and the festival was performed in his hands. Even if he, Bhajani, had not been available, Kaka would have performed the Kirtan because he knew by heart the composition about Ram Navami composed by Das Ganu. In the third year, Balabua Satkar himself came to Shirdi in time for the occasion. Listen to the incident with respect. Having heard of Baba's fame, a desire arose to have his darshan, but he wanted company on the way and was wondering how to find someone. Balabua was himself a Haridas Kirtankar who hailed from Satara but was living in Parel in Bombay at that time. At Brihad Siddhakarvate in Satara district, there was a Devasthanam where Bua did Kirtan on Ram Navami day every year, for which he was paid annually every year. Balabua was connected with these two annual festivals, their Ashadi Ekadasi and Ram Navami, falling in the month of Chaitra. According to a charter of the Mughal emperor, a sum of rupees 2,400 had been allotted for the expenses of the deity Bade Baba, and the arrangements were made by the institution. For these two festivals, Bua paid rupees 30, but that year there was a cholera epidemic at Kawate and the villagers were in difficulty. Therefore, the Ram Navami celebrations were called off there. Bua received letters from there to come to the village next year and the village was deserted. In short, he lost the opportunity to serve Ram and did not also receive his allowance. But it gave him an opportunity to go to Shirdi and therefore he met Dikshit. Dikshit was a great devotee of Baba. The desire to go to Shirdi would be fulfilled if he takes it upon himself, and along with personal gain, spiritual benefits were also achieved. So he told Dikshit that as his yearly stipend was temporarily held back, he thought of having Baba's darshan and performing kirtan there. Babu Sahib then replied that there was no certainty to payment. To give or not to give is in the hands of Baba, and even for the kirtan, permission would be required. While this conversation was going on, Kaka Mahajani came along unexpectedly and distributed Udi as prasad of Shirdi, and this was considered to be a good omen. Mahajani had then returned from Shirdi. He conveyed that all was well and thereafter returned to his residence. Later on, Dikshit very lovingly told Bua that he would ask for Baba's permission, and if granted, he would definitely let him know. As soon as you receive the letter, come to Shirdi. Do not worry about traveling expenses. You will not have to bear them. Have no doubts about it. Later, Dikshit preceded Balabua. Baba gave his permission. Balabua came to Shirdi and had darshan to his heart's content. Sai Baba got the elaborate festival of Ram Navami performed in his presence with great love at the hands of Balabua. Balabua was happy at heart. The objective had been fulfilled. Sai was pleased, and thus everyone's wishes were fulfilled. His expectation was more than fulfilled. Rupees 150 was ordered to be received by him, and Bua was extremely happy. Why shouldn't Bua be happy when Baba gave him gave as much earnings as he would have had 5 years in Kawate for one festival? Thus, he was indebted to Baba. Later on, when Das Ganu was once in Shirdi, Baba, on being so entreated, entrusted Das Ganu with the performance of the Kirtan at the festival every year. Since then, to this day, the Janmotsav is celebrated with a lot of pomp and pageantry. Food is distributed to heart's content, and the poor and downtrodden are happy. At the main gate of the Samadhi Mandir, accompanied the music played by traditional instruments like the Chand Bada and Shenai. The chant of Baba's name resounds in the skies, and the atmosphere is suffused with joy. Just as he had thought of the Yatra and Urus, Gopal Gund was inspired in the same manner to give a new look to the old dilapidated masjid. As the devotee Gopal Gund decided to renovate the masjid by his own hands, he got the stones ready. But the renovation work was not ordained for Gund. The occasion for this auspicious work aroused later appropriately. It appears that Baba wished the renovation should be done by Nana Chandolkar, and afterwards paving of the floor should be done by Kaka Sahib Dikshit. Accordingly, it happened later on. In the beginning, he had got tired of asking permission. Then they made Malsapati a mediator, and Baba gave his permission. So be it. When the paving of the floor of the masjid was completed in one night, the next day itself, Baba came and sat on the gadi. In the year 1911, that the Sabha Mandap was constructed. It was a difficult and Herculean task. It involved a lot of hazards and people trembled with fear. This work was also completed by devotees working at night in the same way and under the same circumstance. In the night, the pillars would be erected with great difficulty, and in the morning, Baba would start uprooting them. Again, seizing the opportunity, they would be re erected. Thus, everyone got exhausted. Everyone geared up their loins, turned night into day to fulfill their objective, undergoing a lot of exertion. Dikshit thought that the site was a proper place to construct the Sabha Mandap, where there was earlier an open ground and a small playground. Putting in as much money was needed for iron columns and angle brackets. The work was finished as and when Baba was at the Chavdi. The devotees would turn night into day and erect pillars with much effort. But as soon as Baba returned from the Chavdi, he would pull them out. Highly incensed on the occasion, Baba caught Tatya by his neck with one hand and with the other shook a pillar and tried to uproot it. He loosened it by shaking it, removed the headgear of Tatya, kindled it by lighting a matchstick, and threw it into the pit with anger. At that time, his eyes looked like fireballs. Who would dare to look straight into them? Everyone lost their courage. Immediately, he put his hand in his pocket, took a rupee, and threw it there, as if to mark an auspicious moment. Curses and abuses were showered. Tatya was also very scared at heart. It seemed a difficult situation. How had it all happened? All the onlookers were surprised and distressed. What is this bad omen today? How can this difficulty which have befallen Tatya be warded off? Bagoji Shinde took the courage and cautiously moved forward. He also fell an easy prey and was given a sound beating by Baba. Madhavra was also caught by him and received shower of brickbats. Whoever dared to intervene was similarly favored by Baba, who would venture to go before Baba, and how could Tatya be rescued? As they were talking like this, Baba's anger subsided and he calmed down. Promptly, a shopkeeper called and a zari bordered headgear was ordered. He himself tied it around Tatya's head like a Raja who bestows a mark of favor. People wondered and did not know the reason of the anger and this attack on Tatya and the reason for Baba making this hullabaloo. What was the reason for getting angry and in the next few moments turning into a pleasant mood? The root cause of this could not be known by anyone. Sometimes he was calm and talked lovingly. Sometimes for no apparent reason, in the twinkling of an eye, he would be agitated unexpectedly. So be it. Such are the stories of Baba. As I relate one, I recall another. Which should I narrate and which withhold? The tendency to diversify is not proper. I have no preferences and make no choice. Whichever story is appropriate for the occasion will fulfill the desire of the listeners and fill their hearts with joy. In the next chapter, listen to the tales gathered from the old people, whether Baba was a Hindu or a Muslim. I shall repeat what I have heard to the best of what I can. How the money collected as dakshina was utilized for renovation of old temples and how he mortified his flesh through the dhoti, Pothi, and Khanda Yoga, how he toiled for the benefit of others, warded off the difficulties of his devotees, will be clarified in the next chapter. The devotees will be pleased. May there be well being. This is the end of the sixth chapter, the narration of the story of Ram Janam celebrations of the Shri Sai Satcharithra by the devotee Hemat Pant, impelled by the saints and virtuous people. This is offered to Shri Satguru Sai Nath. May there be auspiciousness. Om Sai Ram. Now let us do the Aarti. श्री सच्चिदानंद सतगुरु साईनाथ महाराज की जय शिरडी माझे पंढरपूर साई बाबा रमावर बाबा रमावर साई बाबा रमावर शुद्ध भक्ती चंद्रभागा भाव पुंडलिक जागा पुंडलिक जागा भाव पुंडलिक जागा याओ याओ अवकेचन करा बाबा श्रीवंदन साई श्रीवंदन करा बाबा श्रीवंदन तनो बने बाबा साई पाव पाव माझे आई पाव Anangina Ananta Pujima Paveva Ma Inabane Nama Paveva Mata Pita Tvameva Tvameva Bandhu Sada Tvameva Tvameva Vikta Dairangameva Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva Ayenu Mata Pasanirma Mudakala Vapatana Sabhava Naromi Atyan Saklantarasmai Narayana Idi Samarpayami Achyutam Keshvam Ram Nam Narayanam Krishna Damodaram Vasudevam Mare Idhavam Madhavam Gopika Vilavam Janaki Nayakam Ramachandram Mare Hare Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare Hare Shri Gurudeva Datta Satchidananda Guru Sainath Maharaj Ki Jai. Om Sai Ram. I urge all the listeners to read one chapter of the Sai Satcharithra every day and soak in Baba bliss. Baba bless you. Om Sai Ram.